Grab your cocktail and get ready for this episode of the Old Fashion Masonic Podcast. Welcome to the Old Fashion Masonic Podcast, where we talk all things Freemasons while drinking an old fashioned. I'm Brian, and today I've got Jon McConnell, a Kansas Mason, on the podcast. Jon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I've been trying to corner you. It's hard to corner a busy attorney. The attorneys that you can corner and they come right on, they're not busy. So you got to go after the busy guys. And thanks for clearing your busy schedule to jump on. So, Jon, have you ever seen an episode?
I have maybe parts of it. I don't think I've ever watched an entire episode.
So he's busy. That's good. So he doesn't know some of the sorcery that we have, but I also don't want to mess with Jon because he knows how to use the law against me, and that's not always fun. So Jon, before we get into Masonry, why don't you give our listeners kind of a brief tutorial? Who's Jon, the man? Push Masonry to the side.
So I'm the son of two ministers. I was born in Louisville, Kentucky. My parents took a church in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, when I was a baby. And then we moved to Wichita, Kansas when I was, about 8 years old. Grew up in Wichita for the most part, left, went to KU. I did a bachelor's degree, a master's degree at Wichita State, taught college. I was a graduate research assistant and teaching assistant. Moved to Kansas City for a little bit and then moved to Miami, Florida, went to law school, clerked for a judge in Fort Lauderdale, and then ultimately came back to Wichita. I worked as an assistant district attorney in Sedgwick County, prosecuting cases. And then I left, became a criminal defense attorney, worked for a firm in town. And then a little over a decade ago, I opened up my own firm. And so I specialize in all sorts of crazy criminal cases. That's what I do.
Yeah, I remember when you went to open your firm, and boy, you came out just guns ablaze, and typical, what I'd call typical McConnell. If you're going to go big, and I don't think you've really looked back since.
That's right. It was a lot of work, but I'm glad I did it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, family. I don't want to have you buy a ring or a dress.
No. So family. I am married and have a daughter. She is 13 now, so she's in 8th grade, and reminds me all the time she's a teenager. She's 5'9", loves tennis. That's her obsession, and it's an interesting adventure every day because I never know if I'm going to have my sweet little daughter or some teenage monster.
Yes, I've been on that end with daughters, so it will get better at 25, my friend. Listen to what I'm saying. You've got 12 years.
I hope so.
You've got 12 years. So let's talk about your Masonic journey. So kind of go from the beginning, when you joined, and where you're at today.
So growing up, the son of two ministers, there was a ton of Masons in my father's church. And these were individuals that I really looked up to, that were good men, prominent men, very involved in the community, guys that I admired and wanted to, I guess emulate is probably a good thing. My grandfather in Louisville, Kentucky, he was a Mason. He was a, big time guy, ran everything under the sun. And so it was always something I was interested in, but history, I have always loved history. And so I was fascinated by Masonic history, rituals. When I went to KU, I was a member of the Kappa Sigma fraternity, and learning a lot about their ritual. What I figured out is every college fraternity, all of the rituals are a derivative of Masonic ritual. So if you look back at every single fraternity, there was some guy that was a Mason at the time that then stole part of the Masonic ritual, created, some variation. And that's what happened with Kappa Sigma. And so when I moved back to Wichita and was doing graduate school, ultimately there were some individuals that really wanted me to join. And so I think I took my first degree in 2003. I think I was raised very early 2004. And then I joined the Scottish Rite, joined the shrine, and then kept getting involved after that. But I can tell you probably the biggest individual for my Masonic journey was a retired judge. His name was Tom Rahm. And Judge
Mr. Mason.
Rahm, yeah, Judge Rahm in Kansas was a legendary Mason. So he was past master of our lodge, Albert Pike.
Yep.
He was the potentate of Midian Shrine, but he also was a Grand Master of Kansas. But in the Scottish Rite was probably his biggest baby. And he was the SGIG, the Sovereign Grand Inspector General of Kansas. So he basically ran the Scottish Rite in Kansas. So he was the one that
He checked nearly every box.
yeah, but pretty much anything you could do in Masonry, he did. And he was the big one that, when I was raised, wanted me to go through the Scottish Rite, wanted me to go through the Shrine, but really wanted me to be involved in the Scottish Rite. And I can tell your listeners that he also was one of my letters of recommendation to law school. So, I mean, he knew me since I was a little child because he went to my father's church. I actually gave the eulogy at his funeral.
We were there. We were there. I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
Wonderful guy. He was a guy that I really looked up to, that, I was just fascinated with what he did, really respected him and wanted to emulate him and a lot of the stuff that he did.
Yeah, he was a true leader and what I think is the true representation of Masonry. Forget just Kansas Masonry. He embodied the character of what we think a Mason should be, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And so he was very big in the ritual. That was his love, but the Scottish Rite and the pageantry associated with it, that was really his thing.
Yeah.
He is definitely missed.
Yeah, that's for sure. For sure. So let's take you over to the Kansas Masonic Foundation. Those in Kansas know that it's a super active foundation, supports a lot of philanthropies across the state. Talk to us about your involvement in the foundation and why that particular organization is important to you.
So I got involved in Kansas Masonic Foundation. I want to say it's been about a decade, maybe a little bit longer. So my mother, unfortunately, she passed when I was a child. I was 13 when she died. She died of esophageal cancer, which is a very rare form of cancer. Kind of a freak deal. And unfortunately, there's no, 5Ks for esophageal cancer. I think now there's some sort of organization that, promotes cancer research for that, but it's very small. And I was looking for a way to kind of honor her memory, her legacy. And the Kansas Masonic Foundation, Bob Shively, had approached me at the time, amongst others, and really explained to me about the wonderful stuff they do, in part for cancer research in Kansas and supporting the KU Medical Center, all of their cancer research. All of their facilities are essentially endowed and have a name from the Kansas Masonic Foundation. So that's how I got involved and then ultimately got on the board. And right now I'm the executive vice president. And so I think in one more year, then I'll become the president for a 2-year term.
Yeah. You guys are busy. I'm not going to try to put you on the spot, but how many philanthropies is the Masonic Foundation supporting? Under 20, more than 10?
More than 10. It's pretty wild. We try to stay very involved. So part of what we do is try to offer lodges an opportunity to then tap into this money that we have to get involved, to do something in the community where we essentially give money or match funds for whatever it is they want to do to support the local community. We want them to be involved. That's a big part of what we do, that I think, trying to get lodges involved, trying to get them to tap into this money. I think a lot of them don't even realize that it's there. It's free money. We make it so easy for them to do. They just have to do something, find something in their community to give back. And then another big part of it, of course, is all of the wonderful stuff we do for cancer research.
Yep.
One of the big things we're doing now is we, bought this mobile cancer screening unit that goes out to check for skin cancer in rural communities throughout Kansas. We bought a different vehicle that does mammogram screenings for women throughout Kansas. And I mean, the amount of pre-cancers that they have caught and then, saved individuals is pretty nuts.
Yeah.
And I apologize if you hear a drill in the background. I've got workers at my house. I don't know if you can hear that.
I can hear it a little bit, but that's good. So going back to your point on the Kansas Masonic Foundation, for those who aren't Kansas Masons, this foundation, I would argue the Kansas Masonic Foundation does more for Kansas Masonic lodges than anybody else out there. They have these opportunities where members can raise money and donate to a charitable organization in their community. And let's say they raise $500. They can go to the Kansas Masonic Foundation and get those matching funds of that 500, for example, and now give $1,000 to something in their community. There's no reason why Kansas lodges shouldn't be part of this. But what's annoying, I won't even say shocking, what's annoying, there's such a large amount of lodges that don't even participate and take $1 out of it. I can't wrap my head around it, John. I can't wrap my head around it because it takes no effort.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And we created these other programs where we sell raffle tickets for, like a classic car, or we do a gun raffle. And so these tickets lodges can sell, which arguably pretty much sell themselves. And a big portion of the money goes to the local lodge for them to use, in their community. I mean, it's pretty wild that a lot of them don't take advantage of it. But, there are some lodges that do, and it's some of the small lodges in small communities.
I mean, Goodland smokes everybody, it seems.
Yeah, that makes a killing off of it. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing. And, when you go back to the car raffle, for example, the lodges have no risk. The foundation buys the car up front. They basically front this in hopes that we can at least cover the cost and go backwards, right? It's such a valuable tool that is still perplexing to me why it's not being taken advantage of. You can sell 1,000 tickets, right? Get $15 each ticket. I'm going to make that up, so that's about right. Back to your lodge. That could be $15,000 you can use for upkeep of your lodge.
Right.
So, I mean, there's just so many things, so many tools that are available that we have to, the collective we have to want to help ourselves, right? And also help your community. It's perplexing to me, but what the Kansas Masonic Foundation does is amazing. I've been a supporter since it came out. We're big fans, from the cancer research all the way down to the individual support of the lodges in Kansas. So I can't wait to see you take the driver's seat.
Well, one of the other programs we got involved in is we're one of the marquee sponsors for the Next Gen Under 30 in Kansas, which is an interesting program where they're recognizing kind of the next generation of young leaders in Kansas. And so, it's wonderful that we got involved in that. And they actually had the reward ceremony, I want to say a few months ago in Topeka. I think they had 400 or 500 individuals.
Oh, wow.
They had me be one of the keynote speakers, but it was fun to be able to talk to this group of young people and explain to them about Kansas Masonry and what we do, and trying to get them to be involved in their communities in whatever it is that they do. Programs like that Bob Shively, the executive director of the Kansas Masonic Foundation, just had a lot of foresight on getting involved and trying to get Kansas Masons involved. And that's a good thing, because we don't just want people to go to lodge and pay the bills and go through, the motions. They need to get out and do things and be good stewards of their community.
Yep.
That's a very, very important thing.
Well, it's important to the younger generation. When you really do polls on this younger generation, they want to be part of the community and their most precious commodity, which is time. They want it to be valuable and feel like there's a sense of purpose. And that's what we offer. But we have to do a better job as Kansas Masons and as lodges, frankly, to perpetuate that. The tools and frankly, the money is in front of us. Now it's our move, right? Our move.
Right.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. If you had a magic wand for masonry, the fake magic wand, you could tap it and it do one thing for masonry, one thing only. What would you want that magic wand to do?
I would say to go into the Scottish Rite a little bit without going in too much of the history.
Yeah.
Originally, the Scottish Rite, Albert Pike, who was the big, tweaked everything, late 1800s, really, evolved that ritual that they have. The ritual that he designed was one that was communicated kind of in a small, intimate group,
Yep.
more comparable to the Blue Lodge ritual. That evolved in the early 1900s and became this big pageantry ordeal that was put on in an auditorium with, at that time, cutting edge stage productions
Right.
with all these, I call them parlor tricks, these fun things. So it
With the
was,
backdrops and
yeah,
yeah.
this beautiful, presentation that at the time was cutting edge, groundbreaking. People would go and see this show essentially. We're in awe of it. I would love, if I had a magic wand, what I would do is I think the Scottish Rite, the modern version of that would be some sort of electronic production, essentially, where in lieu of watching it on a stage, an audience is then surrounded in essentially not a virtual reality, but a 3D presentation of it. I think that would be the comparison of what they created 120 years ago.
It would immerse you in the experience.
Yes, and that would be something that I think the current generation would be in awe of.
Yep.
That generation in the early 1900s was in awe of because it was groundbreaking at that
Right.
time.
And they were going back and telling their friends, like, wait, what? Well, I can't tell you everything, but if you join, you're going to see some amazing insert, whatever.
Right, right.
Now, that's pretty cool. Well, the technology's out there.
It is.
Now
It
it's
is.
just the attitude and effort to make that happen.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when they did it, that early 1900s, when they started doing that, that was groundbreaking.
Yep.
And ironically, a lot of that part of it came out of Wichita, of those sets, the pageantry, all of that then took off. Everybody emulated it, and then the Scottish Rite numbers exploded because they were putting on this huge production that everybody wanted to see, all the men at that time. That's something that I'm sure the planning now, the foresight, the cost would be tremendous. But I think that's what we need to do, evolve into something like that to then update, in modern times, something that's appealing to the generations.
Yeah. So before we get to what we call our most important question of the podcast, and I know attorneys hate the hypothetical. So I want you to put on a hat like you're an attorney general. An attorney general for insert state, it doesn't matter. So, and here's the scenario I want to throw at you, hypothetical scenario. Okay. So you've got an organization. We'll make it up. We'll call it the Elephant Trainers United. That's the organization that conducts in a series of questionable, maybe illegal activities that promise only a legitimate elephant trainer certification. But they also pose as a nonprofit when indeed it's not. So then these Elephant Trainers United, they're actually part of a larger group. And let's just say it's the Grand Elephant Trainers Congress, whatever. And there are several other bogus elephant training organizations that are committing crimes, mishandling money, physical crimes, all these things. So throw all of that up. Take all that information. So if you were an attorney general, based on the information that you have, would this be hypothetically if you were going to push it, would this be a RICO or would it be a conspiracy? Where would you go at if you were going to go after the fake Elephant Trainers United and this big conglomerate that's this pyramid of sorcery going on? What would you do?
So, I mean, once again, I'm a defense attorney. I am a former prosecutor, and speaking hypothetically. RICO is always thrown out there. People, I think, understand the term. RICO was originally created under federal law as a way to try to take down the mob. They wanted a way to go after, think of it in the late 70s, the figureheads of the mafia. So it's mostly a federal crime. There are states that have adopted similar RICO statutes, but probably the easiest way to go after this organization is going to be more of a conspiracy. Conspiracies, in my opinion, depending on state law of where it is, are a little bit easier to prove. And so depending on the state that you're in or federal law, conspiracy is probably going to be the better way to go after them. So they're going to have multiple issues. The biggest one they're probably going to have is going to be claiming that they're a nonprofit. Even if they are set up as a nonprofit, they have to adhere to certain formal requirements, not only bookkeeping, but utilizing the funds in a specific way. And so the conspiracy being in your hypothetical that they're raising money under the guise of being this nonprofit, so they're not paying taxes on it, and then using it in a way that essentially goes against the law and how they're supposed to be utilizing the funds. So, I mean, they're looking at a criminal conspiracy, in my opinion, that would have massive implications, assuming the government caught on to it, looked in their books, and then figured out, how they were utilizing the funds. Because in essence, what they're doing is operating as a corrupt mob organization. Basically, I would draw that comparison to it.
Yeah,
it's highly inappropriate and does a massive disservice for the other nonprofits that are out there that are, operating in ways that they're supposed to and utilizing those funds in a good way.
yeah. So hypothetically, all of the officers or board members of that organization, they're also subject to those same penalties. Even they could say, I didn't know, but you are an officer of said organization.
Yeah, I mean, they would arguably be criminally liable. Now, to the extent of their knowledge and what they did, that would be something the government would have to sort out. The prosecutors would have to sort out. But you can follow the trail of money, and you can probably see the inappropriate benefits that they're gaining from it. And, examples of that being they're taking in all of this money. The money is supposed to be utilized for the charity or utilized for the organization as a whole that has some sort of philanthropic, quality associated with it.
Right.
And instead of that, the money is being utilized for cars, direct cash payments to these officers, clothes, whatever, right. Things that are highly inappropriate that aren't going to, hospitals, charitable works, children in need, things like that.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunately they're in your hypothetical, creating an organization to try to not pay taxes, to not have the scrutiny of this income that's a direct benefit to the officers of this group.
Yes, that's
which is wild, but it's not all that uncommon, unfortunately. And it's kind of crazy that a lot of these groups they portray themselves to be philanthropic fraternities, the 501c3s, that in essence is just a mob organization where the officers are taking this money and spending it at will, that arguably the RICO statutes or the conspiracies were created to try to take down a lot of these organizations that can be difficult to go after.
Yeah. Well, most people forget Capone didn't go to prison for the crimes. It was the tax evasion that got him. So the money's pretty easy to chase.
It is. And, it's kind of funny too, because um, they may not keep the best books as they're supposed to, but you can look at the cash that goes in, the transactions as far as, credit cards, checks, or just purchases that they did that, you go into Walmart or somewhere now and there's video surveillance of it. So even if they're trying to be clever of, buying certain items with cash, they're there. Walmart has the transaction of what it is that they purchased and how they paid for it. So, I mean, it's not all that difficult to go back nowadays and really trace all of that money. And the amount of money that they arguably are bringing in and not paying taxes on and using inappropriately is wild. And the sad part is that individuals may donate to those groups or get involved in the groups, not realizing that it is not for the benefit of the community, that literally they're just, these individuals are using it as their personal piggy bank.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It puts a blemish on all charitable organizations, and yeah, it's unfortunate. So, yeah, rough deal. So now the most important question of the podcast, my friend. You've not seen the question, and I know that you know me well enough, and you're like, I'm uncomfortable anytime I don't know what's coming in front of me from Byrd. But on the screen, my friend, you will see four things. One of these things must go forever. It was never invented. So on the screen, you see tacos, any kind, beef, steak, chicken, pizzas, any crust, any flavor, any sort of toppings. Wings, they can be with sauce, they can be with rub, and burgers, any way you want. So John, for the history of the world, one of these has to go forever. It was never invented. Which one of these has to go and why?
That's a tough call. I'm going to go the tacos because I think I love tacos, but I could survive without it. Pizza, wings, burger, I just don't know if I could live my life and not, excuse me, have any of them. I can tell you it would be between the wings or the tacos, and I went back and forth, but wings and ranch, just I would drink ranch probably if I could. So that's why I'm going to cut the tacos out of it.
So tacos have to go, and maybe John has admitted he may or may not drink ranch. I don't know if that's the same as shooting ketchup out of a ketchup bottle, which I have been known to do more than once in my life. John, I want to have you on many more episodes, but thanks for joining this episode of the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast. Cheers.
Cheers, buddy.